Уже много лет команда Алекс Карлин гастролирует по России, радуя наших соотечественников настоящей рок-музыкой. Алекс часто заходит на Big Sound, и сегодня как раз проходит его репетиция. Мы решили этим воспользоваться и задать ему несколько вопросов. Добрый вечер, Алекс.
Добрый вечер.
У тебя очень интересная биография, много концертов, путешествий. Как ты сам ощущаешь себя как музыкант? Что для тебя значит музыкальная жизнь?
Well, okay, because it's, let's say, 7 years. My life in Russia is going from one city to the next city, to the next city, to the next city, playing concerts. Sometimes recording, sometimes making recordings and writing songs. But mostly just playing a concert and going to the next city. Everything exactly like I want, really, in many ways. Recently, of course, the concerts are frozen, so now I'm writing songs, working on music, coming to Peak Sound, and working on new songs.
Расскажи о своем первом визите в Россию. Это же было еще в Советском Союзе.
I was on a tour in Germany, in Berlin, in 1989, but I had a chance to come to Moscow because my producer in America wanted me to go to Melodia Records in Moscow to check their microphones. Great quality microphones that Melodia Records had more than anybody in the world. I said, great, because I want to see Moscow. So I went and I took an airplane from Berlin to Moscow. I had my acoustic guitar, and I remember talking to the taxi guy, and I said, where should I play my acoustic guitar? And he took me directly to Arbat. In those 7 days, I did go to Melodia Records. It was very interesting, but it was more interesting that every day I was playing on Arbat with local musicians. So every day we had this sort of Arbat concert, really mostly in front of Vakhtanga. And every day, when the sun was down at the end of the daytime, there was really no bars and clubs to go to. We were collecting some rubles during the day, and we had a big bag of rubles, and we would go to the Hotel Beograd, which was very close, and we gave this bag to a girl working there, and she would come back with everything for kvartirnik, for a great party, with vodka, fish, bread, everything that we needed for that night. This 7 days was, I really fell in love with Russia at that moment. And the thing was, there were photographs, there were pictures, there were photographs of me playing. And those photographs were published in the newspaper in America, the biggest newspaper in San Francisco. It was lucky because there was Harlequin Theater. This Sergei Melkonyan was the director, and he wanted to bring his theater to San Francisco. So he was there, and he was in the biggest theater in San Francisco, where my mom happened to be the director, and they were talking, and my mom showed him the photograph in the newspaper, this big photograph. With Sergei Melkonyan was his helper, a guy called Oleg Bernov, who you might know from the Red Elvises. And Oleg Bernov said, I know that guy, we were partying on the Arbat, and So me doing that on the Arbat was the cause of Melkonyan and Oleg Bernov meeting me in San Francisco, and we were talking, and they invited my American band to the Soviet Union the next season, the following year. It was 6 months. We had work visas, we had tours sponsored by the Ruski Krasny Kres. We went to Ukraine and Ural and Sibir. We went all the way to Baikal and every place. And that 6 month time, we had our video on the Komerchitsky Kanal Dvazhdy Dva. We had, stories about us. It was on television all the time, so people knew who we were. And we had this incredible experience, 3 American guys in the Soviet Union, living just really, everywhere with the rock and roll people of the Soviet Union at the time. We worked with Stas Naman, actually. Stas Naman was helping us, took us to Leningrad, where we played at Oktobersky Zal. People around him were friendly to us and helping us, and we had a lot of different connections. At that point, I really understood that Russia was a great country for me. About 20 years where I didn't come back. But then I started coming back 20 years later, more and more. I would come for a short time, maybe a month or And then I would come for 5 weeks or 6 longer and longer periods. So now I'm here most of the time.
Ты начинал с концертов в США и Европе. Почему же теперь предпочитаешь Россию?
I can tell you lots of reasons why, but I really like the people and I really like the atmosphere and I like just the things you can't describe. Like when I start the day, something happens and there's something, that's good for me. Where other countries can be okay, but it's much less. Russia is the most extremely good place for me. One reason is RŽD. RŽD is the best train system on planet Earth. Incredible train system. If you live in Russia your whole life, you just, RŽD is normal. But other countries don't have it. Well, first of all, in California, they don't even have a train system, really. Like, you can't go from San Francisco to Los Angeles on a train, really. There is one, but it's really expensive and it never goes where you want it. Nobody uses it. You have to drive a car or take an airplane. But trains, to me, are really wonderful. And when we go on RŽD, we're having a party. But the clubs are paying for it because the price is so small and it's so reasonable. And they go from every place to every place all the time. And the thing is that in the other countries, there's two things. They don't have those kind of trains. You have a completely different system. All the clubs in every other country requires you to bring all of your amplifiers, and you should have a big car, and you should have a driver, and you should pay for mechanics and pay for the gasoline and pay huge expenses just to play a concert. But in Russia, it's the only country I know where you never need that. The club has everything. And they pay for RŽD because it's small money. They pay for the hotel. They pay for the food. They pay for everything. They just say, Alex, we want you to play a concert. Come to our city, go on the radio, go on television, make an interview, have a good time. We're going to meet you. It could be 3 in the morning in Siberia, Surgut or any place. You arrive, you come to the platform. There are people there to meet you. They take you to the hotel. In the West, maybe. But in Russia, in Russia, they will always give you this respect. So therefore, I'm having a fantastic time. I'm playing concerts in every city of Russia. And that's the other thing. Russia has more cities, more places. Russia is so big. I go Dalny Vostok. I'm playing in, Vladivostok and Khabarovsk and all these, other countries just don't have that many places. So with Russia, I can play all the cities. And then when I'm finished, it's time to play them again. Russia is more like a planet. It's more like a planet than a country.
Ты, наверное, уже объездил большую часть России, но наверняка еще остались города, в которых ты не выступал.
Yeah, there are a few cities I still haven't played. That's true, and it's I would love to play Nizhny Novgorod, Kirov, that part of Russia, Ijevsk. I missed that, but I'm gonna be doing that soon. As soon as the quarantine is finished, I'm gonna go to those places. I've never played Pskov, but I think that other than that, if you name any city of that size, I will tell you I've played there 5 times. I've played there 8 times. Many times. So I've pretty much done every city. And Kazakhstan and Kyrgyzstan, any country that speaks Russian, I love these places. I love Kyrgyzstan, I love Bishkek, I love Almaty. Those countries are wonderful.
Мы сейчас говорим о твоем проекте в России. На него уходит почти все твое время. А делаешь ли что-то для своих соотечественников в Америке?
It's a really good point is that what am I doing for Americans? And there is a special thing because every year for the last 7 years I've been in Russia, I do go and visit America. I have friends there. And some of them are in the business, television business, movie business, music business. And I tell them these stories. And they say, these are great stories. They told me, let's just make a reality show. Let's make a serial. Let's make what Alex does in Russia. Like Alex in Russia Land. Like Alice in Wonderland. Like Alex in Russia Land. Let's do that. And last year they organized the money to pay for a Russian crew led by Anatoly Goronetsko. He's a great guy who made my RŽD video. And we went and followed my band, Dennis Matwizo on drums and Andrei Samoylov on bass. So we went to our gastrolling and went to our tour. We played in Stary Oskol and we were headlining a motorcycle festival there. And then we went to the Black Sea, and we played some shows in Gelecik and in Anapa. And then we came back to Moscow. Now this is the film crews are following us, they're just seeing what happens. And then we came back to Moscow and we had a party in Yama, in this place where we were having a lot of fun. And then we played a big motorcycle festival here called Biker Brothers. And then the final finale was Russian Woodstock. Because we work with a guy, a really great guy, called Igor Sandler. Woodstock was 50 years ago in America. It's a big legendary concert. Well, 50 years later, America tried to make a 50 years later concert. It was not possible because there's too many rules, too many things, it just became a night, and they finally said, "Отменили," they just stopped, But there was one country in the whole planet Earth who actually did, and it was Russia, and it was Igor Sandler. And I helped him. I got some people from the original concert, Barry Melton from Country Joe, and we had Elliot from China. So we filmed all of these crazy adventures that happened and put it together as a pilot for my TV show. And the point, though, is really we want this TV show to show Americans the real Russian for the first time. Because Americans have like zero information about Russia. So my show is going to be the first time that they can see what a great place Russia is. Because now they have all this negative propaganda stuff, right? Not completely. I mean, you talk to any of my friends in Russia, and of course, in America, talk to any of my American friends in America, and they would be, "Wow, Russia, great. Oh, Alex, it's so wonderful you're in Russia." So it's not like Americans are so stupid that they don't understand that Russia is an amazing place. But, the sort of the government propaganda is pretty thick. It's on the news, you get, "Oh, Russia is doing bad things" or something. But my show is going to show the real people. We were one day, from doing the negotiations with the big Hollywood companies to start business, to start the show. But then the virus, then quarantine, and all of these Hollywood businesses just said, "Stop." So now we're waiting, but we're ready. We have everything we need to start our show.
В России мы это увидим?
Well, yeah, of course you will, and it's going to be on Kanal Jeden probably at some point. They'll just import it. Peak Sound for sure will be in the show.
Расскажи, пожалуйста, почему ты выбрал именно рок-музыку, а не какие-то современные течения?
Well, it's funny because, like I said, I don't really understand genres so much. To me, a song is a song. Anybody today could play it on a piano or on a guitar, and it's still a melody, and some chords and some words. I mean, that's what a song is. So I'm really working with songs. People still use drums and bass and guitar, and so I'm not worried about if the genre is, from what year it's most, understandable. For example, if AC/DC played in Moscow tomorrow, you would sell 100,000 tickets in 1 hour. Rock music exists today. It's not like it doesn't exist. Rock music exists in a big way. Like, I was at the Metallica show in Moscow. I was at the Guns N' Roses show. Phil's Stadium. If you're a kid today, you might be playing metal. Metal never dies. Metal will always be. What I'm playing is more like Motorhead, Nirvana, Ramones, Beatles, classic rock. I don't know if that's, relevant, to everybody. It's interesting, it's an interesting question of what is a modern genre today. I don't even know.
Просто то, что ты играешь, это то, на чем ты вырос, то, что у тебя изнутри идет.
Yeah, you tell a story about what happened in your life, and you make it kind of fun. I write a lot of stuff in Russian, and half Russian, half English. I'm doing this kind of, to me, that's a new genre. 50% English, 50% Russian. It's the new thing. And I write songs that people immediately sing. Like, I wrote a song called "Всё, что надеялся, делался к лучшему." And I played it in Dagestan. And everybody was singing it immediately. I write stadium rock, actually. My genre is stadium rock. And I like Russian words, sometimes Russian words are better than the English ones, like Adski Badun sounds better than Hangover from Hell. The Hangover from Hell is okay, but Adski Badun is even better, you know. So if the Russian word is better, I'll use the Russian word. If the English word is better, I'll use the English.
Ты наверняка знаком и с мировыми звездами. Не расскажешь нам пару интересных или, может быть, забавных случаев?
Well, there was a funny, it was actually in New York City. I was playing a Beatles song from John Lennon at John Lennon's Memorial Park place, they call Imagine. It's in Central Park. And I had my guitar, and I was playing a song called Julia for a girl called Julia I was singing to. Right? And when I was finished, I looked up, and there's Steven Tyler from Aerosmith. He's looking right at me, and he's saying, sing with me that song one more time. But sing to this iPhone, this girl, this woman who's like the judge from American Idol, his girlfriend, and she's standing there, right, with an iPhone. So he comes to me and he pretends he's my old friend, that we've known each other for a long time, and we're singing together. He's got his arm around me. The thing is, he's a really great musician, and he created a harmony vocal to Julia, which has no harmony in the original. But he created a harmony that sounds like Aerosmith, and it's really beautiful. So we were singing together into the camera, and when we finished, there was a crowd of people. They said, wow, Steven Tyler, and it was like, wow, big superstar. So they went crazy to him. But so I went to his girlfriend with the camera, and I said, hey, you know, this is my email address. Please email me the video, right? So I have this great video. So that was a lot of fun.
Алекса, как ты любишь проводить свободное время? Чем ты еще занимаешься, кроме музыки?
I have one hobby, and I got involved in this when I was living in Poland. And I had a concert in Denmark, Copenhagen, and there was this big conference for climate. It was 10 years ago, big important conference of the United Nations. It was the most important meeting. They said, this will decide the future of all people, you know, this meeting. You know. I knew a news organization that wanted me to interview all the people for their news organizations. So they gave me credentials, and they gave me some money, and they said, Alex, go and interview all these people. From Brazil and from, you know, Bolivia, these Indians and Africa, and all these people who are real political activists, like the real thing, you know, not stupid politicians, but really good people who just wanted to, you know, solve the problem. For 2 weeks, you know, I was just talking to everybody. And so that became like a hobby for me, this problem of climate. And for 10 years now, every year there's a United Nations conference. I went to Peru, I went to Morocco, I went to Poland again. They had one in, you know, in Germany. They had one recently in South America. It was just in Chile and in Madrid. And I would interview everybody, and I started learning a lot of things. It's a lot of words, but for this interview, I can just say one thing that I've learned. Like if you're 20 years old and you're like, well, what's going to happen to me when I'm 40 or 50? There's going to be disaster. Right? I said, well, maybe, but there's one positive road left. And believe it or not, it has to do with villages, small villages around the world that are fishing villages. Well, it turns out that the fish are gone. But to bring back the fish, you make the oceans healthy. And to do that is pretty easy, it turns out. It has to do with nutrition that you could put back in the ocean, bring back the nutrition it's lost. And that brings back the fish, but it brings back also what they call plankton, this sort of, it's the food chain of the ocean. But the plankton creates kind of a process where the carbon dioxide gets drawn down from the air, and it goes back into the ocean. And that's the one chance we have. You know, so, but this is the one really positive thing that's happening right now, that there's people going around the world encouraging these villages. It's called 100 Villages. If you Google it, you know, 100 villages. So you don't have to have big governments, you don't need big rich people, you don't need oligarchs, you don't need big money. It's not about money. It's just about fishermen bringing back the fish. Because they need food anyway, right? And they need to to bring back their fish. And when you bring the fish back, you bring the CO2 out, and that's the one thing we could do. So anyway, that's my one hobby, is learning about that, interviewing scientists, writing about it. And I like Shakmati too, that's a little bit. But other than that, I just play music.
Теперь очень интересующий нас вопрос. Как ты попал в Peak Sound?
Peak Sound, yes, well that was kind of as far as I remember, okay, my band, Alex Carlin band, we were playing, actually, I think it was a Novom Godom party. It was a big party. Peak Sound is in a complex, and there's many buildings here, and one building is a big party place, and we partied great, you know, super fun, oh, very good party, you know, and then the next day I'm like, where's my, because I had svoj microphone, and я забыл, you know, forgot it, and I said, I said, who? And they said, oh, звони Dima, you know, Peak Sound, on these deals. So, oh, okay. So I came here to get my microphone. And I said, wow, look at this place. You know, it's the best place. So now I understand this is really the best place for repetitiveness, for the repa. It's got a bar, it's got, you know, it's just great people. It's really perfect.
Спасибо, мы стараемся съесть подарок для тебя.
See, in Russia, спроси и получи. It's like, wow, that's cool, man. Thanks a lot.
Спасибо большое за беседу, очень приятно было.